Mainly what I want to talk to you about in this portion of my executive director's report is what's been going on in the area of dental Medicaid fraud and all the related issues, because I think that's a really hot topic. As you all know, there were hearings back in the Senate back in March, I think it was. Senator Nelson, Health and Human Services, had hearings, and HHSC, OIG were there. We also testified. There was some, our testimony in that hearing primarily, and I was very new to the position at that time, was that this agency's legal right to take action against people who are not licensed by this agency is very limited. And there was a gentleman who had testified later in the proceedings. His name is Jim Moriarty. He's an attorney, and he testified that it was his belief that the Texas Dental Practice Act gave us a lot more authority than we were using, and that essentially if we pull our heads out of the sand, we could do a lot more to address these issues as they exist. We had a meeting with Mr. Moriarty 2 days ago. He and Dr. Doug Terry and Dr. Snakowitz and another gentleman whose name I can't recall at the moment from Texas for Dental Reform came over to the office. And during the course of discussion with Mr. Moriarty, I asked the question, after reviewing our situation, after reviewing the Dental Practice Act and having the discussion that we had with Sarah and Lisa extensively, I asked Mr. Moriarty what he thinks our rights or our authority is under the Dental Practice Act regarding the someone who practices dentistry without a license, whether that's a corporation or whether that's an individual. And as I recall, Lisa, he said twice, and Sarah, he said twice, you have no authority except to refer them to the Attorney General's office. And so I was glad that he confirmed that, because it was disturbing to me that someone of Mr. Moriarty's intelligence and I perceive integrity would have said what he said earlier in the hearings a few months ago, because I thought he was a little bit off base. I don't know what's happened in the meantime. Maybe he understands better what our situation is. But anyway, we have been, since that hearing, we have learned the names and faces of a lot of people at HHSC, at the Office of the Inspector General, both on their criminal side and on their civil side, and at the Office of the Attorney General. We've had meetings with them individually. We've had meetings collectively. Lisa's attended I don't know how many meetings. Lisa and Nicaea and Sarah went over to one of John Roberts' little teleconference things and answered questions. Or we didn't answer questions. We made a presentation on patient abandonment. We've been trying to cooperate as much as we can on this whole issue. Part of the problem, again, and we'll talk. This will eventually evolve into a discussion of corporate dentistry in a moment. But I just want the board to know that we are cooperating with HHSC, with the Office of the Inspector General, with the Attorney General's office, to the extent possible, to the extent that they will allow us. We've opened better relationships than we've had in, as far as I know, forever, in terms of getting information from them and providing information to them. It was in the course of those discussions with Jack Stick and the Office of the Inspector General that we lost our General Counsel, because they realized what a bright, intelligent, well-informed person was sitting across from them, and they offered her a job, and that's how she got over there. So you can blame corporate practice of dentistry if you want to for that, but we'll see. Which also created some new opportunities for Julie Hildebrand to come to work for us. So maybe there's some karma going on after all, I don't know. But anyway, it really disturbed me that there was a perception that this agency was not doing enough or not doing what we could in regard to the corporate practice of dentistry, or for people who are influencing dentists and practicing dentistry without a license. But even Mr. Moriarty has come around to understanding that under the current law, all we can do is refer those people to the Office of the Attorney General's office for prosecution, or in some cases to local district attorneys throughout the state of Texas. So that's what we're doing, and that's what we're continuing to do. Lisa mentioned that we have been working with Dr. Roberts, John Roberts, over at OIG, to send letters to dentists who have been accused of abandoning patients. These are mostly dentists who are in trouble for Medicaid fraud. They've had their reimbursements cut off, and so they're having financial problems, and so they're trying to, in part, deal with that by dumping the dentist who work for them and stop seeing patients. Or sometimes they will say, they'll give a patient a letter and say, I'll take your braces off for $200 or $250 and continue to see you for $50 a visit for maintenance. Those get into issues where you have to start looking at, has that doctor been paid in full for the treatment for that patient or not? Does the doctor have a obligation to continue to see the patient, whether or not he or she's going to get paid or not? Those are things that we have to evaluate. But we are sending out a letter, essentially at the request of the OIG people, HHSC, to tell dentists that they have an obligation to continue to see, let me rephrase it, to remind dentists what their obligations are and to discuss the abandonment of patient rules that we have. And if they're going to stop seeing a patient, they have to go through a certain process to do that. So if we then get follow-up, we haven't opened any cases on that because we don't have any evidence that a dentist has actually abandoned patients yet. If we get a follow-up from OIG or HHSC that Dr. thus and such has abandoned this specific patient or patients as a group, then we will open a case on that and do the best we can to investigate patient abandonment. So we expect our workloads in enforcement and legal to pick up a lot over the next several months as some of these OIG cases start coming to fruition, where there are two different kinds of things going on. One, Jack Stick's group, which is the criminal side, is trying to put some people in jail, and they want their money back too. On the civil side, John Roberts' group is doing two things. They're trying to get dentists, stop doing these fraudulent treatments. Stop billing us for these fraudulent treatments because we're not going to pay you. But we don't want you to abandon the patients you're already treating. So what Dr. Roberts is trying to do is to get the dentist to continue to see the patients, so these kids, don't end up with no dentist to treat them. And they're asking for us to remind them what the patient abandonment rules are in regard to that, which we're doing. So on one hand, you have part of OIG who's trying to put people in jail, get money back. On the other hand, you have part of OIG who's telling the doctors, please keep treating these patients because they need some treatment somewhere. And we're trying to work with both groups as best we can. So that's the issue. And then if these people actually get convicted, go to jail, their licenses will be revoked and is revoked. If we have some cases where we believe that we can prove to a pretty fair standard that fraud did take place, that we can revoke them if the board chooses to do that. If there's some patient abandonment going on, it'll come back to the board to decide what you think is appropriate action for us to take on those things. So it's not just the whole thing of Medicaid and Medicaid dental fraud is not just one issue. It's a series, a big ball of interrelated, convoluted things. One of the things that happened this week is that Lisa made contact with one of the higher ranking, I think it's number 2 or number 3 person over at the office of the Attorney General who called us and was asking some questions about how we do things in the Dental Practice Act. So we finally have made the connection that we need over there. That took a long time because we were pursuing the person at the office of the Attorney General that we could refer cases to. We've been referring cases and they kind of get lost. So we've been trying to find the right person, and that person finally popped up. Lisa would call and pursue them. She would get directed to the Medicaid fraud unit, and that's not necessarily who we need to talk to in every case. She would get directed to somebody out of the Houston office. So finally, we've got the people that we need to talk to. So we have a different issue of practicing dentistry without a license that we're trying to pursue through those courses. That's a separate issue. Now then, on the issue of what's going on with these, what is called the corporate practice of dentistry, but it's really corporations or management service groups having an undue influence on the dentist and thereby practicing dentistry without a license. Technically, again, we don't have any direct authority over those people because they're not licensed by us. Our authority, if we think somebody is practicing dentistry without a license, is to refer them to the office of the Attorney General. Now then, the allegations are that the dental management service organizations, or these dental practice management groups, or in some cases are owned by investment firms or equity firms that are not dentists, of course. They're just investors out to make money, which is the American way. And then they own or buy or acquire a dental practice management organization, who then contracts with a dentist. And theoretically, according to what they say, it's the dentist who owns the dental practice, not the dental practice group, not the management group, not the investment company. It's the dentist who owns the organization, which is what is required in Texas. According to them, it's the dentist who makes the decision as to how to treat each patient. What everyone says, and what we're trying to get information on to prove it, and other people are too, is that in fact the dental management groups are exerting pressure on the dentist to bill more, or to get the billings up to reach a quota, and if you don't bill so much, then you're out. So you have a dentist who owns the practice theoretically, and then you have several other dentists employed to work there. So the question then becomes, who's making the decision on what treatment is necessary or appropriate for the patient sitting in the chair? Is it really the dentist, or is he or she being unduly influenced by some sort of office manager or regional manager to get their billings up? That's what's happening with. That's the allegation, is that the investment companies own the management groups. The management groups have a contract with the person who's the figurehead owner of the company. All the money the practice brings in flows into the management group. Some of it then goes back to pay the dentist and the associates. They get paid more if they reach certain quotas or bonuses. You get fired if you don't reach them. And so that's why you end up then with children who have a mouthful of metal when they leave the dentist office, or they have inappropriate treatment, excessive treatment. What to do about that? As far as let me go back a little bit. As far as the issue of braces is concerned, orthodontia, a few years ago, when the state of Texas raised its reimbursement rates, these companies figured out there's money to be made here. So they started treating children, and were putting braces on children who did not qualify for reimbursement under the existing Medicaid laws, because they only pay for medically necessary braces, not for cosmetic braces. But the companies were putting braces on kids. They were sending in their reimbursement requests, and they were getting paid, because HHSC, in my opinion, was not doing a thorough enough job of reviewing all these things. So they were putting crowns, fillings, everything, so excessively. After a couple of years, HHSC woke up to the fact that the state of Texas had spent more money reimbursing dentists for Medicaid treatment of children than not just any other state in the union, but every other state in the union combined. So, at that which point, red flags go off, warning flares go off, everybody gets upset, the politicians get outraged and involved, and we have hearings, and Senator Nelson says, I want my money back, and I want this fixed, and I want somebody's hide hanging on my wall here pretty soon. So OAG is kicked into high gear, and they're actually prosecuting some of these people on a criminal basis, and others they're trying to work with on the civil side of things. I think what's going to happen is that it's quite likely that somebody at the legislature will introduce a bill to have this agency license or register the dental management groups. That would not give them the right to own a clinic. wouldn't give them the right to practice dentistry. It would just require them, if they want to do business in this state, to register with this agency. We were hoping to have some specific, more specific information for this board meeting, but with Joy moving over to OIG, that was derailed, and so it's going to be next board meeting before we can have something more in writing for you. We have met with owners of some of the management groups. Not everybody who owns a management organization is necessarily defrauding people. We've met with people who tell us and assure us that they're the good guys and are not doing that. As well as I know and have respect for some of their lobbyists, you have to be objective about what you're seeing and hearing. So, but I think it's likely that at least a bill will get introduced to have this agency license or register DMSOs. If we're going to do that, they're going to have to give us money and funds and people to do it. I think it's also, at this point, at least more than 50-50, that a bill would be introduced to have us license each dental practice in the state. I know that there's a lot of opposition to that. I don't know if it would pass or not. But at the moment, we don't know how many dental practices or clinics there are in the state of Texas. We don't know who owns them. We don't know who works there. If somebody is claiming that they are the owner of a dental practice or 60 clinics, it would be nice to know if they really are the owner and what their arrangements are with, in terms of employment, in terms of how much they get paid. Do they have an arrangement with a DMSO that says, the DMSO gets all the money and the DMSO pays the doctor X amount of money per month or so on, or per clinic, those kinds of things. I don't know, it's not up to us to necessarily to suggest that sort of thing, but it seems to me, based on some people that we've talked to over the legislature, that those things are at least under serious consideration at the moment. So this board may end up with responsibility to license DMSOs and license individual clinics. If we license if we license or have an annual registration of clinics, a fee for that would be minimal. $25 a year, $30 a year, something like small. If we license DMSOs, the individual price for that would be substantially higher. I don't know how many there are, but we're talking $1,000, $2,000 a year or something like that. But they make a lot of money. So I don't know, board members, because I don't have a solution to all this. I'm just trying to tell you what we've been doing over the last several months since this issue came up. We have been having meeting after meeting with OIG, OAG, HHSC, Jay Nelson, Senator West, people on the House side as well about this issue. We also had a meeting, Representative Fletcher has called me fairly regularly. We talk about various things that his concerns are. He's expressed an interest recently in what's going on with the Medicaid fraud issue. We had a Representative James White from Livingston, Lufkin area come by 2 days ago as well. He had some issues about dentists in his area he wanted to discuss with Lisa and with me and with Sarah. And he also had issues about Medicaid fraud concerns. So we're trying to stay in contact with the members of the legislature. I don't know what's going to happen on all this. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's not within the power of this board to resolve Medicaid fraud issues. What we can do is, once we have evidence that one of our licensees has committed fraud or has committed standard of care violations in regard to patients or abandonment issues, then it will come to this board, and each of you will make the decision about what to do with each of those licensees at this time. And I will tell you this, you will be under scrutiny when those cases come to you to see what you're going to do about those things. Lisa or Sarah, do you have any further comments on the Medicaid fraud, corporate practice issues?
It's really just we're gonna have to wait and see what the legislature gives us. It could go several different ways, I think. And I think there'll be several different bills of how things will be done, so we'll have to wait and see, really.
we're not gonna get to drive the bus, but they'll ask us maybe once in a while to look at the map and help them figure out how to get somewhere. And I think that's the best we can hope for at this point. Any particular questions anybody has on that?
Well,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I hope they'll ask our advice when they're drafting the legislation, though, because who better to help them with that?
Well, they will. If they ask us to register these people or license these people, we would definitely get a chance to look at whatever's drafted and make suggestions. Then I think they'll listen to us.
And, you know, and I perceive that the TDA is going to be somewhat involved in drafting something also. I don't know that for a fact, but.
I think they're working on something.
Okay.
Again, we will stay in communication with TDA on that because that's a very serious issue to them and it impacts their members as well. But, you know, they have their own responsibilities and we have ours, but we try to share information and work together to the extent that we can on these things. Well, everything that I've said, board members, is my assessment of what the situation is. You know, I may be right, I may be wrong, but that's the way I see it at the moment.